How you doing? Oh, there we are. Hi.
Hi. So we're going to start talking about something that's not workforce related.
It's not like there's anything labor related that's happening right across the country right now.
No. We're going to start on a lighter note.
Thrilled to be here.
Minister. Thank you for that.
Delighted.
Last week.
Although, I am the Minister of Labor of private sector federally regulated companies. Very important for anybody is there out there saying, what the heck is he doing here?
Well, and think about that when you ask your Slido questions.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of important. So, Minister, you were in Belfast last week.
I was, yeah.
And that's my alma mater. He was at Queen's University. So they were celebrating the 25 years after the Good Friday Agreement. And I hear you also met Bill Clinton.
Yeah, well, it was extraordinary. And the Good Friday Agreement, for those who don't know, is the agreement that the Protestants and Catholic paramilitaries and political organizations reached in Northern Ireland. And with many hills and valleys and ups and downs and ebbs and flows, it's worked 25 years later. I was there to escort, as it were, General John de Chastelain, who is an extraordinary guy. He was Chief of Defense Staff 2 times, U.S. Ambassador, and was called upon to oversee the decommissioning of weapons. And it was one of those positions where, in a very hot atmosphere, he was frequently blindfolded by the IRA alone and taken in a car to munitions dumps. This is an extraordinarily brave man. He's in his mid-80s now, and he was there with his wife, and he is a household name in Ireland. He's a household name in Ireland. I didn't have to, I was there really to fed him, to make sure he got his due. Senator George Mitchell, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Tony Blair, Bertie Ahern, they looked after that. They made sure he got his due. It was extraordinary, if for no other reason that this is so important to both the UK and Ireland, and I think actually a lot that we can take from that as well. But it was so extraordinary that I got to share a table, a very small table at Hillsborough Castle, the big supper that we held, with Liz Truss and Theresa May at the same time.
I can only imagine the conversation.
Boris Johnson sitting behind me, Rishi Sunak at the next table. It was, and then of course Bill and Hillary and Tony and Sheree and all the rest, but and little old me. It was something. But what do you take from it? And some of it I think is very germane to a lot of the topics that we're talking about here. What you've been talking about, the importance of hard work. I look at John de Chastelain, just hard plodding work, 12 years. Senator George Mitchell said that reaching the agreement, and it's an extraordinary thing that they reached that agreement, but he said now the hard work begins, and that was left to John de Chastelain. Yeah. And 12 years of resilience, of hard work, of character, of being the type of person that people would trust, and building and earning that trust. It was an honor to be with him. I was deeply moved by his character and his presence. I often said when I was there, he's the best of us. He is the best of Canada in that sense. I don't know of another country that maybe holds up humility and modesty as virtues in the same way that we do, but we do in this country, and they get us far. And he is a man of tremendous modesty, humility, and intelligence and resilience, and he's the best of us.
And I think that relates really well to the topic today. But
here you go.
I do want to ask you a few questions about your current role, of course.
You have a beautiful university. Queen's University of Belfast is a gorgeous university.
It's a lovely place. You've held a number of roles since heading to the Hill in 2015.
I tend to go where the challenges are.
Well, yes, natural resources, Veterans Affairs,
Indigenous Services.
What
I held the last time I was here. Yes.
So I want to ask you, how have those previous roles informed your current role? Because of course, as it relates to equity, as it relates to the energy transition, I think you probably have gained a lot of insight that has led to where you are today in labor and this massive workforce change.
Yeah, I grew up in Labrador, Goose Bay, Labrador. In fact, my best buddy from high school was up here on this stage, Clint Davis. Goose High, or the school that we went to, Goose High in Goose Bay, Labrador. Unfortunately, no longer there, or knocked down because of the asbestos. Anyway, What can I say? I'm a child of the 80s. But when I got up there, when I moved there, when my family moved there and I was about 14 years old, the first people we met were First Nations, the Innu of Labrador. I'd never met First Nations people before. Growing up in St. John's, I always joke our idea of diversity was Protestants. A serious matter, as I just mentioned with the Good Friday Agreement, but Dad, the next week drove me to their community of Sheshachit, 40 minutes away from Goose Bay, and it changed my life, because to see how people live in an Indigenous community at that age in the early 80s and in a non-Indigenous community, that's what I studied at St. FX University in my undergraduate, and my master's dissertation was on Indigenous involvement in natural resource development in Canada. Because it became pretty obvious that the way out of this was through economic development and autonomy, and First Nations, Métis, Inuit people, having autonomy, control over their lives, their futures, and natural resource development in this country. And I've had the good fortune of applying it in government and in the roles that I've held, certainly in natural resources and certainly in Indigenous services, been able to do some work on that. So that, if that's a priority. As far as labor is concerned, I became natural resources minister, and I see my predecessor, I think, is it Ann there? How are you doing, Ann McClellan? Ann will appreciate this, that, very early on, I'm a Newfoundlander who holds the natural resources portfolio, because in 2019, the Liberals were kicked out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And somebody asked in the Ottawa Press Corps, what could a Newfoundlander possibly know about the oil and gas industry? I'm glad I got a chortle there. Appreciate being in front of a learned audience. But I immediately convened every Monday, and they indulged me, 3 former natural resource ministers, Amarjeet Sohi, Ralph Goodale, and Jim Carr. And through COVID and through an oil price war, they gave me the best advice. Ralph and I still convene every week. We lost Jim, unfortunately, and Amarjeet's kind of busy running Edmonton, so we let him away with that. I still talk to Ralph every week. But the other great advice that I got, and that's when the Prime Minister told me that I talked my way into a job, was I consistently got very, very creative and good advice from unions, particularly as we went through 2 crises in the energy sector in this country, COVID and an oil price war evoked by Saudi Arabia and Russia. And, having to call my colleague Sonia Savage, who I had an excellent relationship with as the Alberta Energy Minister, by the way, it's really important to know that despite the polarity of this debate in this country politically, there are many of us who continue to do the work. It doesn't make headlines. It's not like I keep it secret. It's not the narrative. We do the work. We do the work. Bromwell Air in Saskatchewan as well. I had excellent relationships with both of them. In fact, Sonia and I, Alberta and Canada, our 2 governments, co-hosted the Canadian delegation in Stavanger, Norway, at one of the largest oil and gas symposiums in the world, 70,000 people. Never makes the headlines. It's not like I don't tweet about it. But it's important to know that we slog away at it, because we are the 4th biggest producers of oil and gas in the world. Mm-hmm. We have to own that. Mm. If we are sensibly going to talk about the energy transition in this country, we have to know it and understand it. And I shouldn't have to rely on proximity for that. See, I have an office in St. John's, I would argue the most beautiful office in the country, because I'm overlooking the Narrows of St. John's in the harbor, and the oldest city in North America. I see supply vessels going in and out of the Narrows every day to the rigs that are off our shores. But I don't think as Canadians, we should have to rely on Albertans because they're close to it, or Newfoundlanders because they're close to it. I think we just have to really appreciate that we're not going to get anywhere in this country on net zero without Alberta, without Saskatchewan, and without Newfoundland and Labrador. We're not.
So, Minister, let's talk about, you've talked about a few things I want to get into.
And the labor union,
and we have
jurisdictions all work.
we have very little time to do that. So, the just transition.
Yes.
Right?
Hate
People are anxious.
Hate the words.
There you go, Ed. That's your answer. He doesn't like those two words. So we've answered that question.
Nobody in my constituency likes him.
What do you say? What do you say to the workers when we think about what we need to do?
We've rebranded.
Okay, tell us.
Sustainable jobs.
You heard it here.
Listen, all jokes aside, I mean, words matter. Mm-hmm. I think most of you in this room understand words, the power of words. Words matter. Just transition is toxic. And it is toxic to the very constituency that we need to get things going. Workers hate it. Gives them anxiety. Mm-hmm. They're in you've got a lot of oil and gas workers that were attracted to the industry, certainly in Newfoundland and Labrador, which is, and our workers are responsible not only for building Canada's offshore oil and gas industry, but as Anne will acknowledge, and many Albertans thankfully will acknowledge, and people in Saskatchewan, we've built those industries as well. We have a big hand in that, and we go back and forth all the time. As Natural Resources Minister traveling back and forth to Alberta, I joked that it's a long-standing tradition of Newfoundlanders to go back and forth to do energy in Newfoundland, in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We were kicked out in 2019, the Liberal Party of Canada. We were talking down to the very people that we needed for this energy transition, saying things like, clean jobs, which infers dirty jobs. We were talking down to people. And just transition now, and I keep getting told it comes from the labor movement. Yes, it does, but it's a highfalutin term and it's toxic now, so you got to move on. Because the only people that matter here on energy transition are workers. Mm-hmm. If you're out there, please raise your hand, but I doubt there are very many people in this room who know we're on a pipeline to tighten the bolts and the screws to make sure methane doesn't leak. And if you do, please raise your arm and the room should applaud you. Those same skills will help us with hydrogen, will help us with carbon capture, utilization and storage, will help us with renewables. But we got to meet them. So words matter, tone matters, and then ultimately good policy. And this budget, we're saying we're saying this to investors and businesses, you are not going to be able to avail of some very generous tax credits in hydrogen, in renewables, in carbon capture, in clean tech, unless you hire union workers or pay a prevailing union wage. That is amazing. That is a game changer for this country. And that is a tangible move that says to workers out west and out my way, we believe in you. Because what they said to me initially was, all right, Regan, you're going on about renewables. A lot of them didn't pay very well and didn't want unions. So all this talk, moralistic talking down talk is one thing, but then we weren't even giving them a viable alternative. So now we are. I think this is a game changer for us, and it has vaulted us now to the second best place to invest in renewables in the world. Those changes in the budget alone. We skipped over 6 countries, we're second only to the US from that budget. So this is a big move, and it's a big move for workers in this country, and it's a big, big move for what we do and do so well, which is energy in this country.
It was very exciting to see that announcement that Canada is number 2, and we know that to
we're happy with number 2.
Well, yeah, we're Canada, right?
I want 1.
We're getting there.
I will take a 6-point leap.
We're getting there, yeah. But that energy transition is huge. We're going to need count workers, and we're going to need the skills to get there. We have to build, as I said off the top. Wind turbines that aren't even.
Headlines about the fact that I said we need more workers in the oil and gas sector.
Where do we get them?
Well, first of all, that seemed like a negative inference. Who the heck do you think is going to do the work? They're in the industry. And let me tell you, these companies are serious because they understand where the investors are going. It was the first thing I said to Sonia Savage. Well, actually, as soon as I got sworn in at Rideau Hall, which is always very daunting, and before I appeared in front of the Ottawa Press Gallery, I got a text from Sonia Savage because a mutual friend had put us in touch. You got to remember, it's 2019. We've been thrown out of Alberta and Saskatchewan. And I got a text from her saying, congratulations, Minister, when are you coming to Alberta? I texted her back and I said, how's tomorrow? And flew out. Not everybody was happy with that. What else are you going to do? Of course I'm going to do that. And then I met with Bronwyn Air in Saskatchewan right afterwards. Those things matter. Words matter. Gestures matter. You know, these things matter. And I said to Sonia after our next meeting, only a few weeks after Christmas, you know, she convenes the best and brightest in the sector for me to sit down with them and have a very, you know, closed-door session. You know, one of the things I said to Sonia, and one of the things that I picked up very early on was we do not want to be on the other side of the ledger. It was very clear in 2019, 2020 that investors were walking with their feet. And a nightmare scenario for Canada's energy sector is that long table in London or New York or Zurich or whatever, and somebody who's in charge of billions of dollars just says, what are we doing about greenhouse gas emissions? And some junior analyst sticks up his hand and just says, oh, we're writing off Canadian oil. That is a nightmare for us. It is scary how billions of dollars move at the flip of a switch and with the raising of an arm. And we can't be in that position. So I said, what is on the other side of that ledger that shows that we are serious about this? And that increasingly was net zero, which is something that we all realize now. You know, we got the Oil Sands Net Zero Pathways Alliance. That is, I never thought that that would happen. It has happened. We have moved leaps and bounds. I know week by week we feel that we're turtles or tortoises on this. We have moved and we are moving. It is happening. But, you know, you got to meet people halfway, and trust me, when you are the fourth biggest, like, let it sink in. When you are the fourth biggest producer of oil and gas in the world, this is not an easy ship to suddenly steer in another direction. Realistically, it doesn't happen, and we can't afford fits and starts. Because my big takeaway from 2019 is that you'll get thrown out if you don't have people with you. It's another lesson that I learned with rate mitigation on Muskrat Falls in my province, which dominated our politics for, I would say, a decade. The prospect that people's power bills would double overnight. It would have thrown way too many people, I don't want to even disclose the number, way too many people below the poverty line. It would have been a national disaster. If you double people's power bills, it will scare you how many people go below the poverty line. So the lesson learned from that, you can't do it on the backs of ratepayers either. You can't do it on the backs of ratepayers either. And then we've got another lesson. So you've got lowering emissions, keeping workers on side, not doing it on the back of ratepayers, and now we have the added challenge on top of this of a war in Europe and how that has changed energy markets and changed how we view energy security and our energy security. So this combined, this is our national mission. Because let me tell you, when I would attend, Jim and Amarjeet and Ralph all, when I got the natural resources portfolio, told me, you know, you travel even more than foreign affairs. Like you travel all over the world touting our energy to the world. You're all over the place. I told my husband, you're never going to see me. He was thrilled. He's hoping that then I'd make 2 million Aeroplan points because then he gets a lead for life. He was thrilled with this prospect. And like everybody, I did it all from the kitchen and my office in slippers. Sexy, wonderful conferences in Santiago and Abu Dhabi and Vienna by Zoom. Not bitter. Every time I see Wilkinson in Japan, I'm like, there you go.
Minister,
But I'm cluing, but
okay.
It's only to say, one of the things, it's your own fault for having a Newfoundlander up here. One of the things that you learn, we all learned, is when you're at a big conference, who makes the first page in the Zoom, in the gallery view, right? International Energy Agency, G20, all of it, I always made first screen. Not because it's me in my kitchen, but because I'm Canada. The world is watching us. Because we got the natural resources, because we have the people, and because everybody knows we know better. So this is important stuff. Like, the world is watching us.
I would love to ask you questions about Atlantic Momentum and your province, but we're out of time. Unfortunately, we talked about your slippers, but... So thank you. Thank you for being here.
I feel like we were just getting started.
I know. These are fast sessions. What do we tell you? Yeah. Anyway, we've got ahead, but and we didn't get any questions, so you're safe. You're safe. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you.